I was born in the poor village of St. John in Euboea, while my father worked far away at the Panama Canal to support the family. We children ran around all day doing chores, watering the gardens and tending the animals, always obeying the commands of the elders. I guarded the sheep on the mountain, and there I read, syllable by syllable, the life of St. John the Calivite, which kindled within me the flame of monasticism. As soon as I turned 7, my mother sent me to Chalkida to work in a large store that sold almost everything. There I obeyed blindly the orders of the other employees, ran everywhere on errands, and did all the heavy work without ever complaining. One day, while sweeping the shop, I saw spilled coffee beans on the floor, carefully gathered them up, and went to put them back in the sack. The shopkeeper saw me through the office window, called me over immediately, and asked to see what I was secretly holding in my hand. When I opened my palm and he saw the coffee beans, he called all the employees together to give them a lesson in economy and honesty. From that day on, the shopkeeper singled me out, loved me greatly, and would invite me to his home to chant hymns that I knew. 2 years later, I found myself in Porphyrios, working at the grocery store of a relative of ours, which also operated as a tavern for passing customers. One day, 2 elderly customers came to the shop to buy goods and began discussing with nostalgia the Garden of the Virgin Mary. One old man described with tears in his eyes the life of the ascetics on Mount Athos and how much he regretted returning to the world. I listened to their every word, enchanted, as I remembered again St. John the Calivite, and my desire to leave flared up once more. I secretly approached the elderly neighbor when he returned and asked him eagerly, how exactly can someone go to Mount Athos and become a monk? The decision took deep root in my child's soul. I wanted to become a hermit, but I did not know how to leave without money or permission. My sorrow was evident, and I was forced to tell the shopkeeper a lie that supposedly my mother had fallen ill and I needed to see her. He believed me immediately, gave me money for the ticket and food for the house, and I rushed full of anxiety to the harbor. I boarded the ship for Mount Athos, but during the voyage I was overcome by fear for my parents who would suddenly lose me. I could not bear the guilt, disembarked at Limni in Euboea and returned to Piraeus while I lied that my mother had recovered after all. But melancholy consumed me. I lost much weight, and the boss sent me again to go see my parents so I could recover a little. I boarded the ship Athenae heading toward Thessaloniki, but this time I did not disembark at Chalkida. Instead, I remained hidden in a corner, silent. When we reached Idipsos, the sailors found me without a full ticket, but they took pity on me and let me continue my journey without paying. At the port of Volos, I went ashore and grief seized me again. I wept bitterly as I thought of my family that I would leave forever. I stayed alone all night on the mountain, wrestling with thoughts of returning, but in the morning I secretly boarded the next ship again. I no longer had any money and hid at the stern of the ship while I gazed at the endless sea and whispered prayers my father had taught me. I recited within myself the Ermos, the sea of life, and begged God to guide my journey to the harbor of his peace. At noon, all the passengers opened their food on deck while I sat apart, hungry and alone, gazing silently at the sea. A lady sitting across with her family approached me compassionately and offered me a piece of bread with 3 fried smelts. The other women beside her were puzzled by her gesture and asked how she thought to give food to an unknown, strange child. She replied that such street urchins do not deserve attention, but as human beings we must give something, words that were carved deep in my heart. As soon as I heard the word street urchin, I felt a strange joy, because I thought that indeed I had now become a wandering vagrant for the love of Christ. We finally arrived in Thessaloniki. I disembarked at the port, not knowing where to go, and headed immediately to the church of St. Demetrios for veneration. I knelt before St. Demetrios, weeping with sobs, and fervently beseeched him to help me realize my dream and become a hermit. I climbed a hill and found a small locked chapel where I lay on the bench and spent the whole night in tears and prayer. But the temptation was strong. 3 times I wanted to return to my parents, but I kept repeating the supplication to the Theotokos for help. Earlier on deck, I had distributed to the soldiers the gifts and liqueurs my employers had given me, as I wanted to rid myself of every bond with the past. The soldiers were amazed that a small child was treating them, but I felt great relief at casting off the last weights that bound me to the world. I finally fell asleep on the bench outside the deserted chapel after weeping much and praying to the Theotokos to do what was beneficial. The next morning when I awoke, the temptation to return overwhelmed me again. I went down to the port and took the first ship to go back. I arrived in Piraeus defeated, returned to work and to my parents, but my soul remained troubled and my mind was elsewhere. I continued to work as before, but nothing was the same, as my thoughts constantly traveled back to the monastic republic of Athos. Some time passed with inner conflicts where love for my parents battled fiercely within me against the divine longing for the desert. All these wanderings and turnings back finally matured my decision and made my desire for monasticism even stronger. Through sorrow and failure, I understood that there was no other path for me except complete dedication to God and the Church. I stopped wavering between 2 worlds and made the great decision to cut every bridge connecting me to worldly life. I promised myself that this time there would be no return, no hesitation, no tears for what I was leaving behind forever. The firm decision took root in my heart and drove away every doubt and fear that had hindered me until then from following my dream. I prepared my soul for the great journey, knowing now that difficulties and temptations would not stop me from reaching my goal. I said a mental farewell to my parents and siblings, left them in the hands of God, and looked ahead toward Mount Athos with hope. The phrase, "no turning back," became the banner of my life as it sealed my entrance into a new spiritual world that awaited me. The little Angelos who gathered coffee beans and wept at harbors was transformed into a determined novice monk, ready to walk the difficult path. The elder's words about wine and ascetics now sounded like a prophecy that was finally finding its fulfillment in my own life. I finally made the firm and irrevocable decision to leave far from the world without looking back again to find God. Thus began my journey toward heaven as I left behind the earth to ultimately gain eternity itself. My heart was filled with peace, for I knew this journey had no return, only the eternal embrace of Christ.